John Boy guys were discussing, well, are the Orioles in a little bit of an identity crisis? Well, let's play the clip and we'll react on the other side.
Have been flat. When you watch them right now, you can talk about the rotational struggles, and there's a bunch of guys on the IL, obviously, but they didn't really bring in a ton of reinforcements until they signed Gibby, and he's working his way back. But it looks identityless. That's the hard take. That's like, a talking head thing to say. But, when you watch it, there wasn't a lot of life, man. And when you play against the Snakes, maybe it's emphasized because I feel like they do have an identity and they do have a ton of life. Like, you watch the series, and that's what it was to me. It felt like the Snakes were just a fundamentally better baseball team.
So this obviously was right after the Orioles played the Diamondbacks on the previous road trip. And then they came home. They split the 2 games with the Jays. Could have had the sweep technically because of the rain out, but the Jays had a comeback in the 8th inning, pulled it off in extra innings. Jeff Hoffman gets the win in this circumstance. And the Blue Jays walk away with a split, and the Orioles and Jays are now 3-3 on the season. Now, I agree with Trevor on the sense of that they were frustrated, not going to say lifeless per se, but the team didn't have the energy when they played Arizona. The energy was in Baltimore when they were playing the Jays after the first 5 innings of game 1, right? First 5 innings of game 1, you kind of felt that, stuck in the mud. Then the offense woke up. Then in game 2, Gunnar Henderson got going in that series. But then they found a way to not close that out, and it was a tough one to swallow. Then you have the off day. Now, fellas, I think that it is a little bit too hot takey to say about an identity crisis. But what I think is fair to say is that the Orioles need to find what makes them successful here in 2025. And that's the consistency. And whatever that's going to be, it starts with playing more fundamental, leaning on some of your stars, and finding different ways to manufacture runs. And if your bullpen's going to be your strength, well, that was a circumstance where it obviously didn't. But, I mean, I don't know. Do you guys think the Orioles don't have an identity? Zach, I'll start with you.
I don't want to say it's not an identity, but I agree with his take about the lack of life it felt like. And it's not even just in the Arizona series. It feels like we've been talking about this for a while, especially all season. It feels like at times the Orioles go down 2-3-0, and you're like, shit, that's the ball game. Whereas you didn't feel like this even in the beginning part of last year in 2023. It didn't matter if it was 6 runs going into the 9th in a deficit or if it was 1 run in the first inning. The Orioles never felt out of a game. It felt like they were always going to climb back. And I think that's why it was so frustrating, because you hadn't seen that from the Orioles this season, and really in a lot of ways towards the end of last year as well. But focusing just on this season, you hadn't seen a big comeback win. You hadn't seen where you felt like, okay, everything went against them, but they still found a way. And then you get to the first game against the Blue Jays. You're getting no hit through 6. It's just nothing's going right. Down 3-0. Kerstead gets the bomb to put you back up or put you within 1. Adley ties it. Seti gives you the lead to go win it. And you're like, okay, this team does have that life. And you felt it the next game out of the gate. Boom. They hit the Jays early. Every time the Jays responded the next inning, the Orioles had a counterpunch. They were fighting, and it was that team you felt like we were waiting to see from 23 in the beginning part of 24 last year. Then what's most disappointing is you get to the bullpen, you get to Soto in the 8th with a 3-run lead. Like you said, kind of if there was anything of consistency so far this season with the Orioles, it's that the bullpen outside CNL Perez has been lights out. They've been better than advertised.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what sucks even more is you finally felt like, okay, we're seeing this life, this fight from these guys. And then the one pillar that you've been able to lean on this season falls out from underneath you. So I don't want to say they don't have an identity. It's just kind of right now, if they're not hitting home runs or, putting the ball, I feel like it's for every team. If they're not moving guys over and getting them in, they're relying solely on the home run ball right now, which is not a great spot to be in. But I think I'm more with there's been like kind of this slow mojo around the team where you feel like it's kind of this sluggish start to the season.
I mean, it's 15 games in.
Yeah.
Right. So we got so much to figure out here. But Kevin, you and Zach are always on the reactions. You're feeling the pain of it. And again, this isn't my opinion, but it seems like for some, there's just that worry because of how last year ended. And I'm trying to explain to people 2024. And actually, if you don't believe me, we'll have Stephen Vogt had some clips from the winter meetings I think are very valuable for this conversation. But Kev, it's just a worry of, okay, we've been accustomed to this Orioles team just winning games for the last 2 years. Even on the struggle down the stretch last year, they still went to the playoffs. They were still a top team. There's the concern that the switch just isn't going to be flipped through 15.
It's never, it's never a good idea to define a season through 15 games. There's still a lot of baseball to go. There are certainly some worrying trends, and you can date it back to last year if you want to. You can certainly draw similarities, and the roster is not that much turned over outside of losing Corbin and Tony. But, at the point that we're at with Baltimore, what you want to see, and again, you kind of talk about the game a couple nights ago against Toronto where they look down and out. Tony hits the solo home where you're like, man, vibes could not get any lower right now. And then they pull it out and you end up getting the job done. You're like, hey, can you capture some of this momentum and carry it into tomorrow? And then tomorrow comes and you think that they're doing it. And you're like, okay, maybe they turned a corner here. Maybe they are like, that was the season defining win. We'll look back on it. We'll say, wow, they really, and then of course it's the bullpen that ends up getting the job not done. And Zach, like you mentioned, that bullpen's been nails all season, except for CNO, who has had his struggles. And so to have the bullpen kind of implode at that time is unfortunate. And it just seems like, you can't ever get everything clicking at once.
And
right?
I was just going to say, Kevin, it's like we've talked about on Kevin and Zach Reck, the most frustrating part of this team is it feels like there are signs of everything coming together.
Yeah.
And, you felt like on Saturday, massive win to get the momentum back. And then the most reliable part of your team fails you when when you need them. So it's like you see the games where the offense clicks. You see the games where, it's been Eflin mostly. We've seen it from Cade. We've seen it from Sagano, where these pitchers are fighting, the starters to get to the sixth inning to then give the bullpen an easier way to then go help win games. And you felt like every game, like we've been seeing, okay, now 2 of 3 are clicking. Now the other 2 of 3 are clicking. And you're just waiting for it to all kind of come together and click, because I believe it was Dean Kramer said it after his last outing where he was like, hey, we're off to a slow start, but it's only a matter of time before he's like, the signs are there. Things are going to click and we're going to be a runaway freight train when it does. I think there's still that ideology in the locker room that once they put it together, they are a team to beat in the American
Well, we've
League.
seen the best of every aspect of the Orioles so far this season. We have seen how good they can be, and it's unrealistic again to ask a team over 162 to play your best at every single spot in every single aspect, every single game. It's just it's not going to happen. It's not going to come anywhere close to happening. But I just think that you're right. When you see Eflin and he throws these gems and the offense scores 1 run, and then the offense ends up scoring 6 runs the next game, but the pitching staff can't get it together that game, and they end up losing 7-6. You're seeing like, okay, one game the pitching staff is awesome, one game the offense is awesome, but it's another part of it that ends up faltering. And so, I mean, I'm still, and Ryan, I know you've talked about it and we'll continue to talk about it, is the fact that the AL still is so wide open. And while, yes, the Orioles are going through their levels of struggles right now and they have things they need to figure out, I mean, so do a lot of other teams in the AL. And I know everybody's even pointing to the Dodgers is like, oh, even they're struggling at times in certain spots and they have things to figure out. I mean, it's the Padres that have been dominating. And
and you know why they are?
Gavin Sheets.
Gavin Sheets. They're 11-0 at home. But exactly to your point, and this is why you can't press a panic button 15 games in. You can't. You can be frustrated with how things go because you care about your team and you're passionate. But there's so much that has to happen. The Atlanta Braves started off 0-7, and it turned out that they played 2 of the best teams in baseball, the Padres and the Dodgers, and they found ways to lose. It wasn't that the Dodgers and Padres were winning those games wire to wire. Hell, the San Diego Padres are 5-0 in one-run games. They have a very high batting average when playing from behind. And so I actually was on with Jim Riley earlier today on why am I blanking with Jim Riley with what we do?
Oh, okay.
Tomato. Why am I having this? This is like me in the batter's box at times. What the hell am I doing? What am I thinking? Actually, the key is to think less at times. But overall, Jim and I talked about how when you have momentum,
Ball cap sport.
ball cap. Goodness, why was I going to say ball talk? I am such a
I
and
knew it
I've
was
only
so- I
done
knew it
this
was
so
ball
many
sport.
times. But so the bigger thing when you're looking at this is you're going to go through stretches. And again, look back to last year. How many people were ready to crown the Orioles early? The Yankees got off to that hot start, and the Orioles were also off to a hot start. Then things kind of can take a turn. In the American League, and you can even look to the National League, look at last year, the teams that ended up being dangerous down the stretch. Yes, the Dodgers ended up winning it. The Mets, they were supposed to be in a rebuild. June, they're just hanging by a thread. At 500, they go on a run. You look in the American League, the Tigers sold Jack Flaherty at the deadline and ended up getting hot and getting into the postseason, beating the Astros, obviously falling to the Guardians. But you get my point. You got to play it out here. I mean, Houston was terrible to start the year. The first 2 months.
I think people forget that we literally had Houston reporters on this show talking about who they were going to sell at the deadline. And then by the end of it, they were a lot of people's picks before they got knocked off to probably go to the World Series.
Yep, exactly. And I'm going to play one clip right now from Stephen Vogt, Guardians manager. They're playing the Orioles tonight because this is why I talk about identity is different and how your team in 2024 is not the same as 2025. I'll play that clip real quick, Zach. I can do it. But I want you guys to listen to the words, react to it for a second here, just so I can get my point across about why things change, even though it might still feel like you're having the same issues.
Least favorite phrase is last year. We're not going to be the same team. We may have a very similar personnel, but it's not going to be the same group of guys. We've already lost a couple people to free agency. There's going to be additions, subtractions. It's the way it works. So every single team, no matter how many people are coming back, you have to form a new identity.
Yeah.
So our identity, it might look similar, or it might be similar, but we have to find what the 25 Guardians are going to be. And I think the players are going to drive that. They already are. They're working hard, and we're going to come together at spring training to find what's going to be our identity this year. And it could change throughout the year, but we can't do the same things the same way. You got to find who's a team, who are we this year, and let's not look back. We got to look forward.
So, and to wrap this all in about identity list, the Orioles not have an identity, I think around baseball, I would argue if we're going to actually have this game, most teams are trying to search for what that is.